Welcome, and thank you so very much for joining me on another episode of Talking Cloud. Now, this is where we talk about anything and everything cloud, and I always like to say, well, really computing, because what aspect of computing doesn't involve the cloud? And man, there's so much new exciting stuff that's going on right now, and I'm just the Gilligan. But I really strive to get the professors on the program, and I'm super jazzed today. I'll tell you an interesting anecdote about this particular guest. Met him on a plane 10 years ago, and that's how we connected. And I think it's awesome. Now, my guest today, he's himself kind of evolved with the industry as of late. I met him and he was at eBay. If you look at his background and history, I mean, the guy is, Cornell MBA, just a master product guy. His official title, I think, on LinkedIn today is VP Product. But where he evolved, because he's a developer, he's a coder, he gets that stuff into what everybody's moving to. And I really look forward to my conversation today with Craig Calder. Craig, super jazzed about hearing about Agentech. Did I say that right? Agentech?
Yep.
Is it Agentic AI or just Agentech?
The name of the company that I work for right now is
right.
Agentech, yes.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought. So obviously, ladies and gentlemen, that's something to do with those two letters everybody's got at the tip of their tongue. So, hey, man, it's awesome to see you. Thanks so much for taking time to come on the program. Look, I just was kind of babbling on about you. I don't really do my guest justice anymore since we kind of moved to video. I figure everybody can type Craig Calder in LinkedIn and repeat everything or read it all on their own, so I don't have to repeat it all. So I just want to hear what's going on. You can take the boat wherever you want to take it, man. I've pushed it from the dock.
Well, thanks very much, Grant. It's great to be on the show today. I'm super excited to be here. And as you mentioned, it has been quite a while since we first met. I think you and I were traveling in the same direction down to San Jose from Portland.
Yeah,
at the time, right. I worked at eBay. And as you have mentioned, I'm just a naturally curious person. And I think actually, frankly, that is an essential skill that if you want to stay in tech, you have to remain curious all the time and continually advance your skills, because if you become static, you fall behind. Yeah. And it's just like part of living in tech anyway, right? This is an exciting industry. Yeah. And currently
it's like being on a train track, Craig. If you're not moving, you're going to get run over eventually, right?
It is true.
I mean, it's going to happen.
It is true. Sometimes I think of I saw this video once for a show called Wallace and Gromit, and in the video, the dog is on a train and he's throwing down track in front of him as he's going. And I've always thought that seems like a good analogy for what it's like. Certainly now that I work for a startup again, it feels that way sometimes, as you're laying the track just ahead of the train.
Totally. So talk about, you've kind of made a bit of an evolution and evolvement in the last handful of years, really focused on AI. Is it zeroed in on agentic AI specifically, or are you kind of just in the artificial intelligence in general? Talk a little bit about where you're focused.
Sure. This started about 2 years ago, really before AI became hot. So maybe 2.5 years ago, my attention started turning first towards machine learning. At the time, I was working for a company that was involved in the insurance industry, And we were interested in seeing if we could use data in more of a predictive way. They had a lot of inbound claim data, and they were optimistic that they would be able to analyze that inbound claim data with the data they had and make predictive actions based on that. Now, it turned out that the data they had wasn't rich enough to really make accurate predictions. But I started there, and that was my first introduction to using technology. Now, machine learning and AI there are relationships between the two.
Yeah.
And I learned, that was my initial introduction to this world. But then as AI became more prevalent, I started expanding my knowledge space. And so I would say, like, I was certainly at that beginning, I started to see it coming in, and I was really just intrigued by the opportunity. And of course, like everybody, started seeing ChatGPT, which was really the first consumer version of what was
Yeah.
possible, and just blown away by like the accessibility. Like that was really the key, right? The accessibility of this new framework of large language models being
Yep.
utilized. And it was certainly very approachable from a personal, like you and I using it for our personal stuff. And now what I've really been driving towards is helping to figure out, like, how does business use AI for business purposes? And by association, we're looking now at how do we use agents to help actually execute on business value. So that's
Yep.
what I've been focused on for the last year, is really how do we apply AI to business applications.
Now, you just reminded me, Craig, of a post I believe you made, or you reposted, or were involved in, and I read it. I watched the video, and it was really an interesting, if I remember correctly, it was having to do with, the traditional model of pricing software in the enterprise, right? Seats, number of servers, et cetera, et cetera. And it was suggesting that we're going to enter into a new model where, everybody now, let's face it, everybody has an assistant that knows everything the internet knows. It's just dumb as a rock without the right prompt, right?
Yep.
But even with all of that, it still doesn't. It's going to be interesting. How are you going to extract more than $20 a month from me? How are you, and how are you going to demonstrate that you're worth the tens of or hundreds of thousands of dollars that you'll see often in an enterprise software license today?
Yeah.
And I thought the supposition and suggestion on really looking at, hey, look at the value I'm providing to the organization. Let's talk about that. Expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, that was a really interesting video. So just as an aside for those listeners, that in terms of like resources that you can go to, I strongly recommend using YouTube to stay abreast as to what's going on in the industry. Like, books just can't be published fast enough. They're stale by the time they hit the shelves. So I'm a huge advocate of staying abreast of things on YouTube. And that video you're referring to was something that it was an interview done by Sequoia Capital, and they were talking about how to do pricing in this new era of AI, where it's becoming impossible really to estimate, like, what is the subscription? How do you do a subscription based license, or how do you do like a seat-based licensing model? And what they were talking about is you want to shift more towards like an outcome-based pricing model, where you as the provider of this solution are aligning better with the value that your customer is getting. Now, this has often been an elusive thing for companies to get, right? Because now what you have to do is it has to become more of a bespoke pricing model, where
Right.
you have to be able to say, hey, the customer is getting this value out of my software. I want to align my product pricing to that. And so it has to be a little bit more variable, and you have to align to that. And there's also a similarly challenging element of AI currently, which is you pay per token. And so It depends. Like if your customer loads up, 100 megabytes worth of data into your context window, that costs you more than if it was just a 10K file. So there's a variable COGS element to the processing
Mm-hmm.
side of things. So that also affects your pricing. And then there's also like another possible way of growing about it, which is in the agentic world. Imagine that you have developed an agent that is taking the place of a human. You could say, well, this human that was making sales calls for you, that's a $90,000 per year person. You could say, I can do that same functionality for, say, $20,000 a year, and you can bonus my $20,000 a year agent
Right.
based on its success, similarly to how you would have bonused that 90K person. So a
Right.
couple of different ways of like aligning your outcomes with
Right.
success.
Do you ever recall hearing about, of course, you know, Ross Perot Systems, right? I
Mm-hmm.
think it was actually, I believe, the 70s, and don't quote me, and I'll have to look it up to make sure I'm exactly right. But if I remember correctly, he won a contract with the government, and it was objected to by IBM because this was back in the days of Big Iron and his Perot systems. And the reason he won is that his response to the RFP was $0. But yet it was an enormous amount of equipment and everything. And his what he was going to charge is half of the savings.
Mm-hmm.
And it would have been huge if they would have went along with it. Of course, it was objected to, but it was the first time ever that, you know, I mean, this is in the world of truckloads of big iron that you bolt into the data center. And he was saying, hey, I'm going to charge you nothing.
Yeah, that's a
And
really
so,
interesting, like, kind of a full circle. And I would imagine in this world of technology, right, the entire pricing infrastructure, we can move beyond basic, because even the subscription model, right, I think is more in service of finance and accounting than it was to actual pricing and value creation. So maybe in this more sophisticated world, we can align more to the needs of the corporation and really aligning to the customer. So
well, the big buzzword, come on, Craig, you know, I don't even have to tell you this, right? We've went from this world of of essentially a snake eating a deer at the end of the quarter, and at the end of the year he'd eat an elephant, right? I mean, we always, that was the cycle, and every customer knew, hold out, you'll get a better discount, hold out, right? Now, first of all, many of us don't, I mean, with few exceptions, we don't buy stuff anymore, we subscribe to it in the sky, right?
right.
And so that's totally changed the game, just from the standpoint of, you know, I, I don't have to buy stuff. We're in such a drastically different world than the old days. But what it's all moved to is ARR.
Yeah.
Everybody, I mean, right? So everything used to be, hey, meet your number. I don't care if it's 12, 5 seconds before stroke of midnight. If you make the number, let's book it. Now it's, what's the ARR, right? Everybody wants to smooth that out. They want to go from being a snake eating those big animals to a cow eating and grazing every day, right? And so
Absolutely.
what you're suggesting is an interesting kind of, almost kind of passing through that and looking differently at the value that whatever it is you're investing in is providing, which might be more challenging for some solutions than maybe agentic AI, right? Like, I think cyber, right?
Absolutely.
That, you know, now we start to get into assessing risk, and some, it's so much more difficult, I think. But when you have demonstrable productivity impact that you unequivocally do and are going to see more of, it's really, I think, a very fascinating discussion.
Absolutely. And annual recurring revenue is, I think really at the core of it, I think we're transitioning as well out of that, which is going to make it harder for valuations of companies as well. Like we're it feels to me like we are going through a transition phase. It will take a while, obviously,
Yeah.
for us to get through this, but I think we're going through a transition phase of how companies will be valued. And AI is part of what will drive that.
Yeah, I agree. Look, I don't think we're, you know, I'm old. So, and I was super, super lucky getting into the biz in 83 before the Mac even was introduced, right? And the point I'm making really is I've seen some really remarkable iterations, advancements, big moves, right? The internet obviously being one of them. Um, but I really believe that what we're in now with this whole AI and the advancements that have come to fore with Transformer and how it's really changed AI and machine learning to be so much more accessible, natural language processing, the processing power, yeah, all these things coming together, man. I'm super excited about our future, but I
Yeah.
do believe all the rules really are kind of going out the door, you know?
It is going to be a little, anytime rules go out the door, it can be scary for a certain category of people. Back to
Totally.
what I was talking about earlier, like if you're going to calcify your thinking, it's not a good time to be in that mindset because
Yep.
things are changing and a lot is going on. It's interesting you mentioned Transformers. So back to my YouTube example, if you're someone who isn't familiar with that term or how AI actually works, I think it is worthwhile to spend some time understanding that. And there's a gentleman who has published some exceptionally useful content on YouTube. His name is Andre Karpathy, and go to he has a YouTube channel, and it'll take some time. He has a 3.5 hour video where he will walk you through how LLMs work. It's a little technical, but he really helps you understand what is going on. And I think that will help you understand what's going on behind the curtains. And that
Yeah.
kind of knowledge will help bring you forward and give you an appreciation that it's not magic.
Yep.
It's a lot of just technology, math, and really interesting stuff, and that'll give you an advancement there. So I certainly
I
agree with you, Grant. These are times are changing, and
and
it's
I
exciting.
think Craig, and I'm going to be all over that guy, um, because I think that's the advantage today. And what I mean by that is the first movers that really say, "Hey, I'm going to get into this. I'm going to dive into this." It gives you an advantage. And I'm not saying it, and it does give you an advantage. You want to go start up a company in this space because you're an early mover. But I'm just saying in life, because I truly believe we're still at a point where you're not going to get replaced full stop by AI. Okay. But if you're not using AI and someone comes along and is doing your job and is using AI, bye bye. You're gone because and so I kind of liken it to not embracing the internet, right? Resisting, think newspapers, for God's sakes. Those guys resisted the internet. I mean, unbelievably, very few said, "Hey, yeah, man, let's get on," right? And look at them. They're struggling to find their way where early on they could have been instrumental on kind of keeping an association between their communities they could have played a far different role had they embraced as opposed to resisted what clearly took over the world. And I think AI is going to be very, very similar, magnitudes greater.
Yeah, yeah. And it is it's actually a societal dilemma as well, too, right? Take, for
Hmm.
example, the dock workers that were striking last year in Southern California. Essentially, they were striking against automation of their jobs because without, like, what do people do if they don't have jobs? That now that's a little bit of an existential question, maybe beyond the scope of what we're talking about today, but it is certainly an interesting question, which is where is this all going, especially for people whose jobs might be at risk because of AI. Like, anyway, we don't need to dwell on
Listen,
that, but you're
yeah,
certainly drawing attention to an interesting and important point, which is for some of us, there is time to adjust. And for many, there is like, it's important to get rolling and start using AI because if you don't, someone will come in who's using it and they will be more productive and you
yeah,
will not be as productive as them.
yeah. And I think that that's my point too. Everyone should look up Andre Karpathy. If you're under the age of 80, you should. And the reason I say that is it will give you an advantage in your life. Just, I think, to really understand because of the remarkable accelerated pace at which this stuff's coming to market. And I'll give you a perfect example. I just read about it today. It makes me, somebody was talking about uh, a Minority Report. Remember that when the guy had to, get his eyeball changed out to go off grid? Well, Elon Musk's other company, have you seen it? It's called The Orb.
Oh, I have not seen this one.
It's coming to America now, they claim. Now they plan to open up like a half a dozen stores. Think Social Security office, right? But now this is you go in and register your retina. And now
What
get
could go
this,
wrong?
you get a unique user ID
uh,
that's then subsequently stored on the blockchain.
mm-hmm.
And the idea is if they can achieve a critical mass, and they say that it was like 25 million or something, whatever it is, but that it shifts the balance away from hackers. Now, clearly there's hackers out there that are just salivating saying, oh, please do it. Because the minute you start having, I mean, think 23andMe, that's a debacle with this recent breach, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
for sure.
who knows how that could get used. I mean, look at 30, 40 years ago, they probably had no idea in law enforcement the spec that you'd be, right? So just think ahead 30, 40 years. If you know my DNA, I'll be dead. So I'm glad I never did subscribe to 23andMe. But it's we're in a really amazing time. But think about this orb. Now there's supposedly going to be a personal one. But the whole idea is that on the blockchain, you'll have your own unique ID tied to your retina. Good, bad? What's your thoughts?
I don't know. Like right now, it's a miracle we're holding it together with social security number, which is so
Chicken
unsecure.
wire, chicken wire, and
But I don't know.
duct tape.
Honestly, like right now, we've made a transition to real ID here in Oregon, and I guess
Yeah,
in the United States. That's a step forward.
yeah,
I actually, if I felt like I could actually trust some sort of central repository for that kind of data, like
yeah.
imagine how much more secure moving around would be, and overall security, it would be
Totally.
vastly better than what we have today. We've got some steps forward in that area. For example, you have passkey, which can be tied to your facial recognition on your phone, which is a step forward, assuming you trust someone like Apple and Google.
Yep.
So I think it's intriguing. It's an intriguing possibility. I think that I've heard of that sort of technology being rolled out in, say, India, where no one has any kind of ID, and
Yeah.
it's a form of essentially bio ID, which perhaps it's inevitable that we would have to have some level of ID like what you're describing.
Well, if we look into China, it's a whole different world just in censorship and they're watching you. They're socially demarking you. They've got you with cameras that are identifying you. So, you know, I can't think of any. Um, I mean, yeah, I do see the cool, hey, hi, Mr. Calder, welcome to Dairy Queen as you walk in the door. You know, want your usual or whatever, right? Or some store. I mean, I get all that. I'm not sure if I would want all that. You know what I mean? Similar to Minority Report when he's walking and the screens are saying, "Hi, welcome, how are you?" And it's calling him Mr. Chang or something, which clearly he's not, but it's based on his new eyeballs.
I had forgotten about that part of the movie, but now that you're mentioning it, yeah, that's intriguing.
And so, I mean, it just is do we want that much intrusion, or because it's almost it, I mean, to have that global on the blockchain, each person has their own identity. I mean, that would really be awesome. I could go anywhere and it would only be me.
Yeah. I guess it depends on, there was a time when I didn't believe that people would have their location services on their phone all the time. And look at us today. Like I never turn it off.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I'm sure that there could be use cases in the future where either I would want it or I would have to have it. So
Yeah.
even today, like imagine trying to get by without having your cell phone. Yes, it's possible, but there are places now that won't even accept cash.
Well, and
So
it just brings to mind talking about the whole face. Look, I'm a Delta guy, and more and more often when I'm getting on the plane, they've got the facial recognition. TSA, they're, as you know, sometimes they'll want ID. Sometimes it's, they'll look at the camera after you give them the ID. They're using it too. So it's going to be pervasive. It's just an interesting. I guess what I got also out of this story about the orb, Craig, is thinking differently again. There's, I mean, we kind of go through these huge think differently iterations, right? When we entered into the world of personal computing, when we entered into the world of computers that we carried around, I mean, these were just like, wow, could you imagine, right? And I've looked into the speed and pace at which technology is evolving, and it's maybe not all the same metrics that Moore's law was advancing, but the summation and end result is the same, right? It's just going so fast. Storage is getting bigger, bandwidth is getting faster. And so I often sit and just think 2 years, 3 years, because I do feel that it's only going to be that much. What it's amazing to think differently, like this orb thing, right? That just caused me to start thinking differently about our capacity to collect data, our speed in which we can do it, our ability to process enormous amounts, enormous data lakes. What does that mean we could do in 3 years, 4 years that we're not doing today? I'm
yeah,
not necessarily saying, hey, give me the answer. And I'm saying it somewhat rhetorical, but I love it. It's what I love about this industry. Ever since 1983, I've told people the coolest thing about it is no matter when you get in, you're getting in at the beginning of something.
it is true. And I think, bringing this back to AI, I think there's been a lot of talk now where, we're sort of, I think what's happening is we're sort of saturating the whole model, AI models based on LLMs and sort of that language model based approach. We've reached somewhat of a saturation point. And I think that there's a lot of people predicting that the gains at this point will be marginal for a little while. And then what they're now looking into is like the next phase, which they're sort of loosely calling the world model, which would be an AI that better understands the world, right? Right now, AIs are relatively stupid. A 2-year-old can understand the world better than an AI model can,
Right.
although an
Right.
AI model can solve problems that a 2-year-old can never understand. But a 2-year-old can like walk around the world, it can navigate, whereas an AI model has no idea what's going on. So the goal is to that next level. And when you talk about like all these amazing things, it's hard to even imagine what
Right.
a world model would be capable of doing when it can process information around the world. That is really mind blowing in terms of what could happen next. And that's probably not that far away because
Yeah.
there's so much energy now focused in this area. Like it is
Yeah.
seems inevitable that we will get to another level of model that will open up doors that really are difficult to envision right now.
Do you see, the thing I've heard a lot about is it's in your name, the whole agent concept. And tell me if I'm right, because again, I'm the Gilligan, but this is how I kind of see it is like my growing up as a kid, we had Encyclopedia Britannica. And so instead of having one big volume that I would go and have to go through, now I want A or Z or D, right? And that was what I had, a specialist on the letter D. So is that similar in the way that Agentech AI, and if I need to know something about cats, I'd say, hey, C, tell me about cats. Is that kind of the concept?
That is kind of the concept, right? Is that we want to solve like in real world problem solving. We generally break things down into pieces. Like let's say you're in my case, like something I'm looking into now is breaking an insurance policy interpretation down. So I want to actually do policy interpretation. You as a human would break that down into pieces. You may go into one document and then you may look at an endorsement, which is a secondary policy piece. So to do that, we break it into pieces and we assign agents to handle those various pieces, and they sort of work in a linear fashion, handing off their piece to another piece to another piece. So
Mm-hmm.
that's an example of how agents can work together in a workflow. And then what you have to do is bound that with various guardrails to make sure it doesn't get confused.
Yeah,
Another example
I
is
see a.
you can
Uh,
create these specialized agents that have they're designed to do specialized things. And so in that case, they may have technology in them called routers where they decide which direction they need to go with what they've been given.
mm,
Again, you put guardrails around those to make sure that it goes in the right direction.
mm,
There's quite a bit of complexity around all of this, as you can imagine. It now
mm,
creates the need for a new kind of you have to do QA, and we call them evals, where you're having to make sure that you keep track of is the model performing as expected, because now we're in a little bit of a world which is new to programming, which is it's more probabilistic. You're not totally certain which way it's going to go, whereas in
mm.
the past programming has always been if this then that and that.
Right, kind of
So
Boolean.
yeah, exactly, we're moving
Yeah.
into a new world of coding which is more like real world, but we need to now adapt how we do programming.
Huh. Huh.
It's really
Yeah.
interesting stuff. It's going to take some time, and that's what's going on right now, which is what makes things complicated. Is we're all having to learn not just AI, but new techniques for developing the software to support these new processes. And so that's why it's easy for you and I to use our tools on our desktop and do things for ourselves, but for corporations to inject AI into their processes, we need not just AI models, but we need now all this infrastructure surrounding it so that we can
Yeah.
figure out how to manage it in production.
Yeah. I was just reading an article, Craig, about, I think it was uh, 83 to 95% of enterprises are failing with their implementations of AI, not failing to tell their users to or allow their users to go do a prompt somewhere at Chat GPT, but the implementation, like you're talking about, where you bring that in house and really put it to use, put it to work, so to speak, that's a different challenge because it is bespoke for every individual company and how you're going to put it in. And there's a lot more to it, right? I think that's the other thing. There's many pieces in the box. You know, if you want to try to do it on your own, as opposed to just using what co-pilots of the world.
Exactly. Yeah. And then that is exactly true. So yeah, I'll throw out another tidbit for those listeners who are interested in understanding more what the cutting edge is on this topic. There is a YouTube channel called AI Engineer. You should look that up. And from that, you'll see what I really like about AI Engineer is I don't have the time nor budget to attend these very impressive their talks, workshops, and training for AI engineers. So you can go to this content and really understand like real live use cases where these people are implementing and solving these problems. And I think that if you're considering trying to spin up an implementation, you should listen to what these people are doing, and you can get like you can walk in with eyes a little bit more wide open into
Amen.
what you're getting yourself into, because I think part of the reason they're failing is that they're not understanding just what they're getting themselves into. And
yeah,
that is, this is not easy. And that is what I think companies are realizing. And that's why they're not succeeding the way they'd hoped.
The accessibility of natural language processing and bots, if you will, like ChatGPT, have really been a blessing and a curse. And the curse side of it, I believe, and this is what I've been preaching, I've mentioned this before, we have all these lemmings that don't have any idea that it's a guess, right? Everything's tokenized and all the other fundamentals underneath that I think, okay, yeah, you're right. You don't need to be an expert on a combustion engine either. But you do kind of got to understand the pedals and what that's, doing and, the basic principles. And I feel very strongly that people should be informed. And I love, so Andrej Karpathy, is that right?
Yeah.
Karpathi?
That's Karpathy is how you spell his last name.
Got it. Okay.
He has a lot of really excellent technical oriented content, but his more recent publishing contents are more approachable and I think really give you some deep understanding of what's going on. It's a remarkable gift he's giving people to help understand what's actually going on in LLMs and models in general.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. And I'm a big fan, a big believer of that, of staying educated. Wow. This has been so cool, Craig, talking to you. Because the last time I talked to you, I think I met you and I was thinking as a sales guy, and oh man, how could I sell to eBay? But I love staying in touch with you and building our friendship. And I really appreciate you coming on the program today. So thanks so very much.
Likewise, Grant, it's great to stay in touch. I love your energy. You're so enthusiastic. It inspires me to frankly, you exhibit all the traits that I admire in people who are curious and just pushing forward in the world. This is an exciting time. It's always an exciting time to be alive.
Yeah.
And we should never, even though things aren't perfect, things will never be perfect, but things
Amen.
are exciting. And I think for those people who want to follow my content, just send me a LinkedIn invite. I'll be happy to, because I post regularly on my thoughts on AI. So that's what Grant, that's how you got this set up. So
that's why I reached out to you again, because I saw your post. And so, hey, people, I'm telling you, reach out to Craig, connect with him. He has a lot of I think we could talk for an hour or four just about the whole pricing discussion. And I'm a big advocate of, if you want things to change, Don't expect them to change. Look at them differently, and they'll end up changing because they're not the same when you change your view of them. And I too, I love the stay curious. It's so critical now more than ever in this industry. I'm really I'm grateful to call you a friend, Craig, and really glad that we're staying in touch. And I'm really excited to see how things evolve for you as you kind of push off into being a thought leader in AI. So
Thank you. Appreciate
I'm excited. Yeah, super. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, this has been awesome. And, I'm hoping to have more of these because I'm really curious and excited about the whole world of AI too. And the good news is I'm a Gilligan there too. So it'll be perfect for the program. But hey, I hope you've enjoyed today as much as I have. It's been awesome. Craig Calder, thought leader in AI and product development. Check him out on LinkedIn. I hope you liked it. Like it, share it, tell your friends, subscribe. Come on back because we're going to have another episode. We'll look forward to seeing you there on the next episode of Talking Cloud. Thanks so very much.